Have you ever wished you understood people a little less? Because I have, and I know that sounds strange. Isn't understanding people supposed to make life easier? Except it doesn't always. Sometimes it means replaying conversations long after everyone else has moved on. You understand why someone hurt you before you've even let yourself feel angry. And somehow, you end up carrying emotions that were never yours to begin with. For the longest time, I thought I was just overthinking. But the more I learned about psychology, the more I realized something surprising. Some people naturally read between the lines. They notice patterns, pick up on small changes in behavior, and instinctively search for the reason behind everything people do. The problem is, once your brain starts doing that, it rarely switches off. Today, we're talking about the hidden cost of understanding too much. Why highly observant people often feel emotionally exhausted, why seeing every perspective can make life harder instead of easier, and how empathy without boundaries can slowly steal your peace. Most people think understanding someone automatically makes life easier. It doesn't. In fact, it can make life a lot more complicated. Because once you understand why people behave the way they do, your emotions stop feeling simple. Instead of thinking, they were rude, your brain starts asking what happened to make them that way. Instead of getting angry, you start making excuses for them. Before you know it, you've talked yourself out of feelings you were completely allowed to have. Psychologists call this perspective taking. It's the ability to imagine another person's thoughts, feelings, and motivations instead of seeing only your own side of the story. That sounds like a wonderful quality, and in many ways, it is. Studies consistently show that perspective taking can improve relationships, reduce unnecessary conflict, and help people cooperate more effectively. But like almost every psychological strength, it has a downside when it never switches off. Because there is a huge difference between understanding someone's behavior and excusing it. You can understand that someone hurt you because they grew up in a difficult home, or because they're stressed, insecure, or afraid. None of those explanations erase the fact that they still hurt you, and that is where people who understand too much often get stuck. They become so busy understanding everyone else that they stop listening to themselves. Instead of asking, was this okay? They keep asking, why did they do it? Those are completely different questions. One protects your boundaries, the other can quietly erase them. Now, have you ever noticed how two people can walk away from the exact same conversation and only one of them keeps thinking about it for the next 3 days? That isn't always because the conversation mattered more to them. Sometimes it's because their brain kept looking for one more piece of information that would finally make everything make sense. Our brains are prediction machines. They constantly try to understand why people do what they do because understanding makes the world feel more predictable. If you can explain someone's behavior, your brain feels like it has solved a puzzle. The problem is, people are not puzzles. They're emotional, inconsistent, and sometimes they don't fully understand themselves. Yet your mind keeps searching for a reason anyway. You start wondering if they were just overwhelmed, having a bad day didn't mean what they said, or if you misunderstood everything. Every new possibility feels like it could finally give you closure. But instead of finding an answer, you end up collecting more questions. That's why some conversations stay in your head long after everyone else has forgotten them. You're not replaying them because you enjoy overthinking. You're replaying them because your brain still believes there's an explanation it hasn't found yet. The difficult part is realizing that not every question has an answer you'll ever get. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do isn't finding the perfect explanation. It's accepting that you'll never have one, because closure doesn't always come from understanding another person. Sometimes, it comes from deciding you've understood enough. If you've ever had someone tell you, I don't know why I'm telling you this, there's probably a reason. People can sense when they're being understood. And once they do, they tend to keep coming back. Psychologists have found that feeling understood is one of the strongest predictors of emotional closeness. When someone feels safe enough to be honest with you, they naturally start sharing more of themselves. At first, It feels like a compliment. You become the friend everyone calls when they're falling apart, the person people vent to after a breakup, the one who stays on the phone for hours, helping someone make sense of their life. And because understanding people comes so naturally to you, saying yes feels automatic. What most people don't notice is that understanding someone and carrying them are two different things. You can listen without becoming responsible for fixing everything. You can care deeply without making someone else's emotions your full-time job. The problem is that people who understand too much often skip that distinction. They leave conversations feeling emotionally drained without knowing why. Not because they talk too much, but because they quietly picked up emotions that were never theirs to carry. Eventually, you realize something strange. The people who feel the safest with you often know the least about what's happening in your own mind, because while everyone else is talking, you're usually the one listening. And somewhere along the way, you became so good at understanding other people that you forgot to ask whether anyone was trying to understand you. That's when empathy stops feeling like a gift. It starts feeling like a weight. The strange part is, I don't actually want to understand people less. I like that I can see different perspectives. I like that I don't jump to conclusions. And I genuinely think the world would be a better place if more people tried to understand each other before judging them. But somewhere along the way, I realized I had started treating understanding like a responsibility. If someone was cold, I had to figure out why. If someone pulled away, I had to analyze what changed. If someone hurt me, I somehow felt responsible for finding the explanation before I was allowed to feel the pain. And looking back, I don't even know who made that rule, because understanding someone has never been the same as owing them unlimited access to your empathy. That realization changed a lot for me. I stopped feeling guilty for protecting my peace just because I could explain someone else's behavior. Sometimes people disappoint you because they're overwhelmed or because they're insecure, and sometimes because they made a choice. You don't have to believe every action comes from a hidden wound, every ending needs one final conversation, or every person who leaves your life is a puzzle you're supposed to solve. I think that's something a lot of us forget. We spend so much time trying to understand other people that we never ask ourselves a much simpler question. What is this situation asking me to do? Because those are two completely different conversations. One keeps your attention on them, the other finally brings it back to you. So let me ask you the same question I asked at the beginning. Have you ever wished you understood people a little less? I don't think the answer is becoming less empathetic. I think it's learning that empathy needs boundaries. You can understand someone's story without making it your responsibility. You can see the good in people without ignoring the ways they've hurt you. And you can care deeply without carrying every emotion that walks into your life. Maybe the goal was never to stop understanding people. Maybe it was to stop abandoning yourself in the process, because the people who understand everyone else often forget to understand themselves. And maybe that's the real cost of seeing every perspective except your own. So, the next time you catch yourself replaying a conversation for the 100th time, or searching for one more reason to excuse someone's behavior, ask yourself a different question. Have I been trying to understand them, or have I already understood enough? Because the answer to that question might change far more than the conversation ever could. And if you've ever felt like understanding too much was both your greatest strength and your greatest burden, then there may be another reason your mind works this way.